Good evening, Facebook Live. Paul Sterling here, and I am part of a group that comes at 6 o'clock or 6:05 p.m. West Coast time and 9 a.m. West Coast time every morning, every evening. It's Scott Katamas from Love Coach Academy, Debbie G from Spirituality Gone Wild, and me, Paul Sterling from Argue Less, Love More. And the idea is, how do we create more compassion, connection, and understanding in these challenging, turbulent times? And I had several other people who were going to join me, and things happen. Tonight's call tends to be about men and masculinity. And I am pretty much the crazy professor of relationships. I have a background in quality control and problem solving. My first sort of wake-up call to this was with a guy named Robert Kiyosaki, who wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He introduced me to Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins ended up being my mentor, and for a while, my boss. I worked for Tony Robbins. And so a lot of what I'm going to talk about tonight is about men, masculinity, and relationships, and what do we do with our power? Because right now on the planet, you can see the divine side of masculinity and the dark side of masculinity. And part of that, I want to dive into the uncomfortable conversation of the feelings we're not willing or not able to feel. And this wild ass map behind me, I am actually going to break it down. So if you pay attention, you can understand what goes on in almost all conflicts. Because way over here on this side is the feelings we don't want to feel, and we will do almost anything to avoid feeling those feelings, like shame, embarrassment. You know, when somebody makes a mistake, look at how many politicians are unwilling, unable to make a mistake. And if you think about the concept of leadership, leadership is taking us somewhere we haven't been before. It's management is following a proven path. Leadership is going into the unknown. And this ties into politics, and it also ties into relationships. And how do we be more compassionate with ourselves and with each other in relationships? And what is masculinity? What does it mean to be a man in 2020? What feelings do we feel, and what feelings are we wanting to avoid? Again, over here, it's the feelings we want to avoid that a lot of times drive our behavior. If we look at in the past, in the past, hell, in my family, there was feelings that were safe to feel and feelings that weren't safe to feel. And those feelings guided the behavior in our household. My dad, who was a very powerful, macho, Irish Catholic contractor, builder, strong, smart, alcoholic. And the feelings that were not okay to feel in my house were fear, embarrassment, shame, sadness, vulnerability. The feelings that were okay to feel were anger, upset, dominant. And so here's how it tied in. When you look at relationships and the feelings that are safe to feel and the feelings that aren't. For my parents and my mom, who is still my hero, and my dad, I love my dad, but boy, could he be an asshole. My mom was incredibly feeling. She had and has a huge heart. And what would happen in the upsets and arguments, a lot of times she'd end up crying. And my dad's expression was, the strongest defense is a strong offense. So he would be offensive. And I learned early on that it wasn't safe to be vulnerable. It wasn't safe to feel my feelings. I watched, and who Who got the attention was my older brother, and he was tough. He was a race car driver, a martial artist. He was a James Dean bad boy. And I ended up, I was very empathetic and very in touch with my feelings, but it wasn't safe. And I went to try to prove that I was tough and spent 18 years as a commercial fisherman in Alaska because I wanted to prove that I was a tough bad boy. And that way I wouldn't have to feel my feelings of fear and disappointment and vulnerability. And it ties into relationships. And there's a transformation happening right now in the world of relationships. What's safe for men and the masculine to feel, and what's not safe? And what does the feminine, if we are in a relationship with a feminine, what feelings do they want us to feel? So this is a whole dance that happens, and this chaos right here, if you think about it, it all starts over here. And I wish I had erased it and just started at the very beginning. But what runs and wrecks our relationships, there are hundreds, if not thousands of things that influence our relationship, but there is one thing that's running and wrecking our relationship. It's called your ROS, your relationship operating system. And that relationship operating system is made up of your habits, patterns, and beliefs. So if you want to transform your relationship, you're trying to transform the results that you're getting in your relationship. And it can be with yourself. Like the big change that I've been working on is my relationship with myself. Do I make it easy or hard to win with myself? Like growing up in my household with my dad, it was almost impossible to win. It was never good enough. Like right now, I wrote a book. It was bestseller on Amazon, and that means it was in the top 10 in 9 different categories. In 5 categories, it was number 1, including for couples and counselors. But part of me goes, not good enough. Should have been New York Times bestseller. Like, it's like this constant, this pattern that we end up in of not good enough, do it better, do it harder. And that is the masculine battling with itself. And I'm trying to learn how to have a better relationship with me and with my beautiful partner. And how do I express what I'm wanting and needing, and how to be vulnerable without clicking over into, I have these. So we're communicating from 3 different places. That was the reptile brain. So when we're in reptile, we're attack. When we're here, when we're in our heart, so we either communicate from our head, our heart, or our hurt. This is our hurt. This is our heart. Hey, this is our head. So growing up, there was a lot of this, and whoever was the dominant dinosaur won around the family. And I'm learning how to change that, change my relationship with masculinity, change the relationship with myself. So what do we want? We want a different result in our relationships. To get a different result, you have to take different what? Over here is actions. And actions, you can see it, patterns and habits. The whole idea here is to try to figure out what habits, what patterns are sabotaging your relationship, what habits and patterns are supporting it. And then looking up here, actions drive results. What drives our actions is the beliefs. And are our beliefs supporting connection or sabotaging it? You can look at the big picture and the small picture. You can look at politically, are our beliefs sabotaging this experiment we have called America, called democracy, or are our beliefs sabotaging it, or our actions? And then what about in relationship? And what about in relationship with yourself? What are your beliefs about yourself? Are they sabotaging you or supporting you? And lastly, what's your vision? What's your vision for what you want in a relationship? So I wanted to talk a little bit more about what's it take to transform the way we feel about ourselves and each other. And how do you create a safe space for your vulnerability, especially if you're in a strong masculine place? And for about 8.5 years, I taught in prison. I taught anywhere from minimum to maximum security inmates. The stuff I'm teaching right now is some of the stuff I taught them. The reason a lot of them were in prison is because they had problems with communication. They didn't know how to communicate to themselves, and they didn't know how to communicate with their partner. And there were certain feelings they didn't like that were dangerous almost for them to feel. So they behaved in a way often with violence. And some of those feelings that the masculine and feminine, but especially the masculine, needs to become more familiar with is how do we deal with shame? How do we deal with embarrassment? I would highly, highly recommend getting on YouTube and watching Brene Brown. Watch Brene Brown when she talks about vulnerability, and she talks about shame. If you're going to be a leader in your household, if you're going to be a leader in your relationship, if you're going to be a leader in your company, if you're going to be a leader on the planet, you need to change your relationship with shame, embarrassment, disappointment, because leadership is about making mistakes and adjusting. Management is about following a proven path. Leadership is about creating a new path. And what's happening right now in the world of relationships is it's a new path. The masculine and the feminine, or gay relationships or lesbian relationships, the dynamic of relationships is totally transforming. And we need leaders in there. We need people who can lead the way, that can go and make mistakes and go down that path and report back and go, well, that path didn't work. That screwed up. I tried that and it didn't work. It sabotaged my relationship instead of supported it. And I'm a guy, like, here's what I learned growing up that doesn't work in relationships anymore. It probably never worked. I learned that the person that you proved your power by withholding love and connection and intimacy and touch, and that you punish somebody into better behavior by withholding. And I know a lot of people still do that. And at time to time, I still do that. And it's embarrassing. God, I hope this is not recorded and not going out to the public, because, but that's what we do. We've got to look at what are our habits and patterns, and how do we deal with those feelings we don't want to feel? How do we deal with the upsets, the misunderstandings, the chaos and confusion that is in almost every relationship? And if we learn how to master that, we'll transform our relationships. I'm going to give you an example. I am a whitewater kayaker. For a long time, I've lived in Colorado. I'm out in California right now, but I lived right on a river, and there's different classes. So class 1 through 5, and now they're even like 6. But 1 is a flat river, 2 little current, 3 river rocks. You got to learn how to navigate down the river. 4, danger. 5, crazy, friggin' crazy. And you really need to navigate. What does this have to do with relationships? Almost everything. Because when I was learning how to kayak on levels 1, 2, 3, it was okay. You could learn, and you didn't roll. You didn't get rolled upside down. Well, you did occasionally, but you could stay upright. By the time you hit class 4 and 5, you're going to get rolled on a semi-regular basis. What does roll mean? It means your kayak gets flipped upside down, And you have to do this maneuver called an Eskimo roll and flip yourself back up again. What does that have to do with relationships? If you're going to be vulnerable, if you're going to try to feel those feelings that are scary to feel, the relationship's going to get turned upside down from time to time. There are going to be misunderstandings. There are going to be conflict. There are going to be upsets. Needs are not going to get met. Feelings are going to get hurt. And the important thing is not to try to avoid that. You don't try to do it, but it's like, how do you get back in connection? How do you roll back upright after you've been flipped upside down? One of my mentors, a guy named Marshall Rosenberg, the creator of nonviolent communication, he said something, and this is important. He said that the normal outcome of most communication is misunderstanding. The normal outcome of most communication is misunderstanding. And that was actually a relief for me to hear, because I thought I was doing something wrong all the time because there was always miscommunication going on. And the more that I have watched it from afar, the more I see that what he said was totally true. That we try to communicate and it doesn't get through, and then we think something was wrong, versus going, wow, I thought I said I loved you. You got all upset. What did you hear me say? And it's like, oh, you heard that. Because a lot of times what goes wrong is we say one thing and they hear something else, and then they make it mean something else entirely. So communication is much more complex than we make it out to be. I mean, you think about it, communication, we make sounds that we hope have a meaning, and what we hope is it means the same thing to you that it means to me, and often it doesn't. So what creates so many upsets in relationships is miscommunication, misunderstanding. That ends up leading to conflicts and upsets and arguments. And the whole idea here is to learn some amazing, compassionate communication tools so that when you end up in an upset, an argument, you can turn things around. Like I said in my kayaking metaphor, you can roll back upright and handle it. And so part of the way to do that is the more upset you are, the slower the communication needs to go. And I'll tell you a quick story about that. My mother came to Denver once to, she was coming to visit, and I wanted to drop my car off at an auto repair place in Denver while she was there. So she was going to follow me in another car to the auto repair place, and then we'll drive back to my place together. Now, if I want somebody to follow me in a car, what do? I know my way around Denver, and I could have gone zipping through the yellow lights, going really fast, and I would have gotten to the repair place and have lost my mom. So if I want my mom to follow me in a car, or if you want somebody to follow you in a conversation, what do you have to do? You have to slow down. You have to check. Anytime I'm making a turn, anytime the conversation changing direction, check in your rear view mirror. Go, wow, can you tell me what you heard me say? I want to make sure you're still with me. I want to make sure, and I take responsibility. I want to make sure that I'm being clear. So can you tell me what you heard? Oh, you heard that. No wonder you're upset. I thought I said I loved you. You heard that I think you suck. No wonder there's an upset here. Let me try again. So check your rearview mirror. Talk in small chunks. Now, see, this tends to be a feminine trait, but masculine does it too. If I say it in 10 different ways, then one of them will get in and they'll hear me. And that does the exact opposite, because the masculine tends to have the capacity to listen. Like, this is just some oils, but this is a container. This is how much I can hear. This is how much my partner can talk. So when we're talking, sometimes what has to happen, little chunks. I'll ask her, little chunks, just give me a chunk. And sometimes a chunk is just a sentence. So when you're communicating, the more emotional it is, the smaller the chunks get. The more you check in, the more you look in the rearview mirror and make sure your partner, whoever you're trying to communicate, is following you. And what you do is, can you tell me what you heard? And make sure that you're being clear and that they're hearing you. Small chunks, do it and keep communicating. So that is one of the keys. So the things that wreck relationships is when we end up getting in conflict. And that's what this whole big page is about. That's the anatomy of a conflict. And I am going to walk through that. And I promise you, some point soon, I am going to clear that up and make it simple and easy to read. But here you go. Something gets triggered. There is something, somebody does something, says something, they use a tone of voice, a certain way of looking at you. You have a thought, you give yourself a message, you make up a meaning when they look at me. So think about the last time that you were upset with somebody. What happened that triggered it? And what meaning did you make up? When they look at me that way, it means this. When they talk about me that way, it means this. So the whole thing, this starts the dance, the conflict dance. You get triggered or they get triggered. Something happens. And then here's what happens when the dance happens. You engage. And see, the thing is, as a couple, are you going to make your partner the enemy or the ally? I'm triggered, and if I make my partner the enemy, like it's their fault that I'm triggered, what happens is we go into reaction and we push them away. Now, this big mess over here is the dance floor. So how we can dance on this side, this is a continuum right here. On this side is the avoidant. This side is the pursuant. Down here's where we get quiet. Up here's where we get loud. So here's where we can go. So somebody gets avoidant and quiet, they go down here into the corner for martyrs. Over here, they get loud and pursuant, and there are the attackers. So here's where the quiet martyr, here's where the combative. And they're different levels. These are the levels. Alert, alarm, attack. So all of this, you know, if you spent an hour, maybe 2 hours on this, it would all make sense. And I'm going to work at clearing it up because it definitely looks confusing. So here's the question. We get triggered. Again, this is the conflict dance floor. And if you understand what's going on in your conflict, you'll have less of them, and your relationship is much more likely to succeed. Some of the core skills, there are 7 core skills that you need to make relationships remarkable. And one of them is how to meet conflict with confidence, courage, and curiosity. This is how you do it. Something triggers it. You make up a meaning. The dance starts. You engage with your partner. Are you making your partner an ally and bringing them closer, or making them the enemy and pushing them away? Now, here's the critical thing. Right in here, you can have your fantasy or your fear. So it's really important to go and talk to your partner, like whatever is your reoccurring upset. Like every time you're driving, I have some couples that have driving issues. One partner wants to drive faster, the other wants to drive slower, you know, and so almost every time that they're driving together in the same car, it's an opportunity for conflict. So when you're not driving, here's a perfect thing to do is go, honey, when I'm driving, here's my fantasy. When we get triggered, my fantasy is you're going to go, oh man, I love the way you drive. Thank you for keeping us safe. My fear is no matter how I drive, you're not going to like it. And I can do the best I want that I can do, and it's still not going to be good enough. And by the way, The masculine, just understanding the masculine mind, and it doesn't just mean men. I'm talking about the masculine driven mind, the hunter mind. Women have it at times. I have it at times. I have a feminine side and a masculine side. So when I'm talking about it, I'm talking about that masculine driving side, and that masculine side wants to win or to be able to win at something. And in relationship, what winning means is not making your partner wrong so you can be right. Winning means I can make my partner happy. I get points. And I'll tell you, there's silly things I can do for points, like taking out the trash, dealing with recycling, doing different things. I do the dishes. I do whatever I can to get points. And so the more that you can give the masculine points, and a lot of times what happens is you've got to decide how you want to modify behavior. And we all try to modify our partner's behavior. You can try to modify it by punishing them or giving them points for the things you like. Punish them by withholding love and affection and attention. And I used to do that. God, I was good at that. I could go, it's embarrassing, a week, sometimes 2 weeks of withholding love to prove how bad, stupid, and wrong my partner was, to prove how much they hurt my feelings. And I did that instead of being vulnerable and saying, wow, you really hurt my feelings. So here we go. We're moving all the way down. It starts again with somebody saying something, doing something, a trigger happens. It brings up that feeling of vulnerability, anger, whatever the feeling is, because we make that look or tone of voice mean something. Because see, whenever my dad gave me that look, it meant like I was about to get in deep trouble. So when you give me that look, it triggers that. Then the dance starts where we engage. The couple engages. I engage with my partner. And when I engage, do I make them my ally or do I make them my enemy? Do I bring them closer and go, I'm really feeling scared? Or do I make them the enemy and push them away? Do I talk about my fantasy of how they're going to respond, or do I talk about my fear and assume that how they're going to react? And we do this dance. So we either, this is a dance floor again, avoidant, pursuant, retreat, attack. We get quiet or we get loud. Down here, the martyr's corner, this up here, the dictator, dominator corner, where we get combative. Then what ends the attack? The battle, the fight between us as a couple, or yes. Does somebody retreat, defeat, compromise, or resolution? So retreat, that's somebody loses, somebody sort of wins. It's really lose-lose, because even when somebody retreats, you'll pay for it later. You may have won the battle, but you're going to lose the war. You'll both lose. If there's a defeat, it's really lose-lose. Compromise is a lot of times lose-lose. Resolution is win-win. So let's look at this area right here. Whatever we do in here, does that escalate or de-escalate? If it de-escalates, it makes our relationship better. We feel like an ally. It can heal. If we react, it makes it worse. It can shut down and it escalates and pushes us apart. So one of the things you can do, this is like the taker, writer, downer. When your partner is triggered, they're in their reaction, they're on the dance floor, they're up here, they are dangerous. And the reason I'm using the dinosaur, it's that part of our brain that is a reptilian brain. And this is where we go often when we're hurt. When we're in the reptile brain, when we're coming from our hurt, the only thing we're worried about is where is the danger? How do I protect myself? What do I need to do to feel safe? And anybody that's moving around me could be the enemy. And this is where a lot of times somebody comes home upset from work. They're like something happened at work. They're all pissed off. They walk in the door pissed off. They try to tell their partner, man, I am upset. And their partner starts like arguing or not giving him empathy. And pretty soon, all the upset and anger the person had at work is now aimed at their partner at home. And it ends up being my trigger triggers your trigger, and off we go, the dinosaur dance. And that is the conflict dance. Now, if you want to get somebody out of the hurt and into their heart, when you're in your heart, what you're worried about is how you feel, feelings, emotions, connection. This connection's the most important thing for when you're in your heart. So if you want to get someone out of their dinosaur head, there's one question you can ask. And I'd love for someone to type that in the comments so that it's there. But the question you can ask is, honey, what do you need to feel safe right now? Because a lot of times what happens is when we try to logicalize away a dinosaur, here's what that looks like. Your partner is all upset about whatever it is. It can be politics. It can be what's on the news. It can be about the laundry. Whatever it is, their relatives, work, they're all upset. And you come on and you go, honey, it's really not logical that you feel the way you feel right now. If you just think the way I think, you won't feel bad. And boy, rather than this person feeling the love and understanding, they're really hurt, because what the message is you shouldn't feel the way you're feeling right now. So now not only do you feel bad, but you're being made wrong for feeling the way you're feeling. So when you try to logicalize someone's pain away, that rarely, if ever, works. They may get quiet, but it doesn't increase connection. And sometimes even talking to them about feelings doesn't help. What the main thing this dinosaur needs is to feel safe, that they need to relax and know that what they're feeling is okay to feel. So when you say magic words, honey, what do you need to feel safe right now? The message you're giving your partner or whoever it is your feelings are more important to me than anything I was going to say or any feelings I have. So right now, what do you need? That is so calming and so magical. And it works with kids, adults, prison inmates. Like I said, for 8.5 years, I taught everywhere from minimum to maximum security inmates. And these were the communication tools that I taught them. So I'll summarize it again. If there are questions you have, type them in there. And if not, I'm probably not going to go the full hour tonight. Tonight was about men and masculinity, but also about communication and how do we deal with those feelings that we don't want to feel when we're in the place of leadership. Because in the place of leadership, you're going to make mistakes. And the more public and powerful your leadership position is, the more public your mistakes are. Can you deal with mistakes in public? Can you deal with shame and embarrassment and disappointment? Because those are the feelings that a leader's got to deal with if they're going to lead. And masculinity, the masculine role oftentimes is about leadership. And I'm talking about the role. Women can do it, men can do it. It's not like, I'm not talking about men versus women or anything like that. I was brought up in an amazing feminist household. My mom schooled me well. So this is about the masculine, feminine, and leadership, and what's happening with this transformation of masculinity. So last time, I'm going to do a quick summary. And then if you have relationships and you're wanting support and you're wanting understanding, there's several things that you can do. One, right here is you can go and get it's arguelesslovemore.net/support. Get a relationship support session. Spend it, it's an hour to an hour and a half, and get really clear where you are in your relationship, where you want to go, and what's in the way. Which of the 7 relationship roadblocks is blocking you? And get some support. It's like this session is like looking, I know it sounds odd, but looking in a mirror. You get to see yourself and your relationship, and you get to see the stuff that you can't see, your habits, patterns, beliefs, what's getting in the way of you having what you really want. So the last time through, at least for today, the conflict dance. I'll get this out of the way. One or both of you get triggered. It could be a look, a tone, a thought, a message. Somebody does something, says it in a certain way. What triggers you is not the thing, but the meaning you give up or give it. When he looked at me that way, that meant. When she said it in that tone of voice, it means that she really doesn't believe me, that she's being disrespectful, or when he does that, it means he's lying or he's not telling the truth or he doesn't care about me. So we make up a meaning about it, and then we engage with each other based on that meaning. And based on that meaning, it depends whether we engage with each other as allies or enemies. And normally in the conflict dance, the conflict starts when we're engaging as enemies. And how do you know that they're an enemy? You're defending yourself from them or you're attacking them. And when we get upset, we move on to this is the dance floor. This side of the dance floor is when we're avoiding or retreating. And a lot of this is based on this particular one is based on a lot of the work of Dr. Sue Johnson and the attachment theory. So over here is your avoidance, over here is your pursuance and attacking. Over here is quiet to loud. And so this right here is your martyr. You're shut down, you're in your cave, you're hiding. This is your combative, your dominator, your dictator. So what happens is we engage, and it either brings us closer or further away, and then at some point it ends. We quit, we retreat. Somebody gets defeated, there's a compromise, or if we're lucky, there's a resolution that brings us closer. And it takes work. It takes work to lean into conflict with confidence and compassion and curiosity when your partner is triggered. How do you lean in? And part of that is to know that almost all communication's either an act of love or a cry for help. Yes, the feeling behind the action. So that's it for tonight. If you want some personal support, get a relationship support session, arguelesslovemore.net support, or you can come over because you can tell I'm like the mad scientist. I'm very clear about looking at what are the systems behind the upset and making the invisible visible. If that works for you, I'm probably a great coach for you. If it doesn't, there's a lot of other coaches at Love Coach Academy, and Scott Katamas is my partner in putting these events on, him and Debbie Garcia. And there's a group of people who've dedicated their lives to making a difference in people's lives. And so you can go to lovecoachacademy.com and find a love coach that's a match for you, that inspires you and pushes you and occasionally kicks your butt and helps you transform your habits, patterns, and beliefs, changes your ROS, your relationship operating system. That is what's running and often wrecking your relationships. And the problem is your relationship operating system was created by a 7-year-old, by a 5-year-old, by an upset little kid. And oftentimes it hasn't been updated in 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 years. And your ROS is still making the most critical decisions of your life. So thank you so much. I'd love to hear what you got out of this little rant that I have tonight. And if you need any support from me, arguelesslovemore.net/support. And I appreciate it. Hopefully we will see you once again. We do this at 6 o'clock p.m. in West Coast time in the evening, and at 9 o'clock in the morning, 7 days a week. And each one is different. My main focus is working with couples. There are people that are working with singles. There are people that are working with recovery. There with codependence. There's, we have a whole different groups of presenters, and you can find out more at lovecoachacademy.com. So thank you very much for your time and energy. I hope that you are safe. Remember, all lives matter out here. And America, let's take care of all Americans, no matter what race, no matter what color, no matter what gender, no matter what preference. It's like what makes America great is when we love our diversity. And what makes us weak and vulnerable is when we pick on each other because of the diversity and we push each other apart. So it's time that we had a bigger goal and we pulled together and unified in peace rather than destroy each other. Thank you very much. Have a great evening. I totally appreciate you. Ciao. Oh, thank you, Deborah. I see this was awesome, clear. Yep. And got your book. Yes, Deborah's talking about, you can get it on Amazon, Argue Less, Love More. And it's basically, it's a bestseller, and it's 5 things not to do in communication if you want to avoid triggering your partner, what to do instead, because it's no fun talking to someone who's triggered. So what are the 5 most common triggers and how do you avoid them? Thank you so much. Have a good evening. Yes, humans matter. Thank you so much, Deborah. And it's time that we started seeing people instead of color, that we treat each other with incredible humanity and wonder, and all lives matter.